All right. Hello, Andreas, and welcome
Hello,
everybody to
Sven.
another episode of Labs Talk.
Welcome everybody to Labs Talk. Exactly. Sven,
How's it going? You're not in the office?
been a while, right? I'm not in the office. You're not in the office
too.
either.
Yeah, it's too late for this, right? So let's see.
It's too late, actually.
Perfect.
We have a guest in a very different time zone. That's why. But let's get to that in a second. Let's like always. Let's start with a bit of a recap, right?
Absolutely. So last episode was with Sasha Schmidt. It was epic to talk to him, right? So it was all about the future of sports and how it relates to technology. What do you still remember? I think there was this 3x3 matrix, actually. Do you still remember that?
Indeed, I do remember the 3x3 matrix. That was a methodology or a concept Sasha introduced to classify all future technology into a 3x3 matrix, and the matrix had basically two axes, whereas the one axis had the kind of people involved in sports. That's athletes, that's fans, and management. That's one axis. And Sven, do you remember what has been the other axis on that matrix?
The y-axis actually is the one thing I first didn't quite understand, but it was all the different technologies and the categories. So physical technology, information processing, and then human interaction technologies. And actually, for this show, we can maybe in a couple of seconds also try to put it onto that matrix if we're able to. Let's see. What's left really is that he uses sports, right, and all these sports technologies basically to explain tech, which I found quite interesting. And luckily, SAP has something to do here too with all kind of sports offerings. So,
like when we just spoke before the show, we didn't really think that through. We thought about it the other way around. We are going to talk about Agentic AI. Today, we try to put Agentic AI onto that matrix, but not the other way around. We didn't try and explain sports with that particular technology, right?
Yeah.
We could have done that. Yeah. Maybe our guest can help with that. So we came up with
exactly
Agentic AI being in that column for human interaction technology. That's probably where we think Agentic AI belongs to. But really, we're going from sport to something entirely different today. We mentioned it a couple of times. It's Agentic AI we're going to talk today.
Perfect. I mean, it's the next evolution of AI and all the large language models and whatever's happening. And we have the perfect guest. We have Shardul Vikram with us today, CTO and SVP of Data and AI, SAP CX. And I think he can probably explain that very well. What exactly you're doing all day long, actually. Hi, Shardul.
Great to see you
again. Welcome to Labs Talk.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Always good to be chatting with you both.
Perfect. So, Shardul, can you explain a bit actually what's your role at SAP CX, and then maybe let's lead right away. Let's not waste time and explain Agentic AI, of course. Perfect.
Absolutely. So I'm the CTO and head of AI, data and AI for SAP CX. So I'm essentially responsible for the product architecture, the data strategy, the data architecture, and also with a specific focus on AI, right? And over the past 2.5 years, most of the focus on AI has primarily been in the generative AI space. And as you rightly called out earlier, right? Like it's not that we didn't have autonomous systems before. There's a reason automation and automated jobs were a thing, which used to run at scheduled times and are still very widely used in enterprise. The great thing about agents is that it has the same notion of automation, but then you add in things like planning, reasoning, iteration with a specific goal of achieving the outcome that was told to it at the very beginning. And then that's what really separates an agent from, let's say, automated job that you might try, which might also use AI. Right? It's not that we don't have automated jobs, we do. But this is the key difference and what makes everyone so excited about agents.
So I think you're jumping right into the topics, of course, right? But which is perfect, right? And let me just try to recap, right? I mean, most people out there understand there's AI, large language models. You can basically type a text and get some response back, right? So what is the key component that makes an agentic system now different? Is it the capability to take action and reason, as you just said, basically, and then really call APIs in the ecosystem, for example?
It could definitely be a part of it. It could also be talking with other agents, which might have a different set of skills. But as long as the agent can discover the other agent, it can communicate with it again in natural language to help achieve that particular outcome. Right? Like, and this is what makes agents different from, let's say, a pure request response system. Request response could definitely be a big part of agents as well. There's nothing that precludes it. And the whole definition of agents is still pretty much up in the air, right? Like what my definition is very different from what anyone else's could be. But at this point, I think almost all the experts are converging on the fact that like it needs to have that basic capabilities of planning, reasoning, autonomous execution, collaboration, iteration. Right? Like so, these are the primary skills that a software component must have in order for it to be termed as an agent. Or at least we at SAP that we definitely try to adhere to those strict guidelines.
Yeah. One question coming from that customer interaction, from the customer experience sector. User agents or user chatbots have been a hot use case basically from day one when AI entered the scene, and those chatbots helping customers have been the really spotlight use case. Now with agents becoming the next hot technology, maybe let's get back and put a little bit more light into why agentic is different and how agentic is different in those type of use cases.
Yeah. So let's just build up on the example that you took, right? Like which is essentially that's the support chatbot that you integrate with that you see on most websites, right? You go to a telecom provider or your phone provider, you would see, hey, ask me anything, and then you ask something, and usually the answer is not right? Like, and you're disappointed by it, and after a while you give up, and then you end up calling
they all
the
gave
phone.
me a Python script that worked pretty well all over the place.
Yeah. Right. So and this was because primarily a lot of the chatbots were rule based, right? Like the first thing is you try to figure out intent. Now you could use an AI model to basically classify the incoming statement into different intents, but it was still pretty much based on workflow rules. You would say, hey, like, is this a question about password resets? Then this is the answer that you should give. And if this is a question about this, right? Like, so it all came together rather in a tedious and cumbersome way. And when we started introducing AI and machine learning into chatbots to make them more intelligent, it was primarily around how can we auto-classify an incoming statement into a pre-existing set of topics. And can we ask clarifying questions until we can reach a particular intent, which were all good. Like you would have probably seen those chatbots get better over the course of last 10, 14 years. And my belief is now the next gen of chatbots you'll see, they're going to be much better. They're actually going to surprise you as long as they're implemented right. I must add, right? Like, as long
I
as they're
believe
implemented
one big difference is also right when it comes to language, for example, right? I mean, nowadays agents they can just magically translate all the languages and still classify it correctly, right? Which is, I think, one of the big issues with workflow systems, for example. Yeah.
Exactly, and typos are another big one.
Yeah,
right. Like
exactly.
the amount of human time and effort that's wasted because of typos or because of utterances that are normally not found in a sentence. Like, for example, me personally, like I tend to put a lot of in my sentences. So I'm sort of like the worst kind of candidate to talk to a chatbot or to talk to intelligence
I just sorry.
That's not.
I didn't want to expose
properly.
you. I just want to expose our bad German English, actually. So finally, there's a system that understands us, right? Perfect.
Exactly. Right. Like, and that understanding the intent, because it gets it so intuitively, because it can understand things that it has not even heard before. Right. And look, depending on who the audience of this podcast is, right, there could be folks who are deep into LLM and generative AI and the deep learning architecture. So when I say the word understand, I use it very loosely, right? Like it's from a perception perspective. What we think it understands is primarily just a game of like tokens and probability and how things are related to each other. So, but it can not just understand it, You could also give it instructions to do something meaningful with it, and it will try to do it based on the constraints you provide.
Yeah.
And that is what really is very different from this next gen of chatbots, taking that particular example. But with agents overall, how do I put it in? So let's take. I saw the pre-chat or pre-show chat that both of you are doing about sports analogy. Now, my sports analogies are going to be really bad because they're mostly going to be about cricket, which both of you will probably not get. But it essentially boils down to is this, right? We are talking in English right now, and suddenly if I start using Hindi, both of you will probably not be able to understand it. And then both of you have amazing skill sets that I don't have. But because I know you, and as long as I can figure out a way to communicate with you, I can get you to help me. Now, in a prior world, in a pre-agentic world, the way I could get to help you was only if I call you with a with this very specified protocol. Like, okay, this is the API call. This is the signature that I need to call. These are all the parameters I need to pass in, and then you would give me a response in a particular format. And that's why building these collaborative systems, which have been around, distributed systems have been around for a long period of time.
So that also means that these new agentic systems, and now I've made it, maybe that's also the connection to CX now, they really build up context and they build up memory about a specific user, for example, right? So in this case, I can try to build up my knowledge about Shardul basically, and I will know at the end that you like to shop in this and that category, for example, right? So I can be of more help as an agentic chatbot, for example. So I'm just assuming that. So, but maybe let's chat a bit about CX use cases, for example, right? Agentic AI CX use cases.
Which is an approach to know more about the customer. And you're saying that the agent could leverage that knowledge to help a customer better. Just to summarize what I understood, is that the correct understanding how that customer experience type of use cases evolve? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, so there are like primarily two kind of use cases that we are looking into, right? Like one is which helps drive top line growth, which is, in other words, helps bring in more revenue, right? Like, so in case the commerce example, that's expanding on what Sven had said, right? Like, for example, if I go into an e-commerce website, and won't it be amazing if I can just shop using intent? Like if I ask you the question like, hey, like I have 5 guests coming to my house. I am making apple crumble pie. Help me out. And then I don't even know the recipe for it. I don't need to do the pre-work of, I need to figure out the recipe. I need to figure out all the ingredients. I need to search for the right ingredients. Like now you have this multi-agentic system, which will understand your intent. It will figure out, hey, like it's probably about like, first of all, I need to discover what the recipe is. And the second, I need to figure out like what the preferences for this particular customer are. Like, do they only shop organic? What are the typical price points? So that when I give my recommendations, I take both of them into account and then give you the right recommendations. And then if let's say a product is not available, how can I give you suitable alternatives? Well, so this will be a completely new way of how we do shopping. And this is just one example of a commerce agent. And the example of a service agent will be where it will help with the bottom line. It will help your operations get much more efficient, right? Like, so we launched CX agents, the shopping assistant in December, and the sales and service agents in February, which will be a big part of our business data cloud launch. And we are already seeing customers like Bosch, right? Like they are using the system to categorize millions of incoming tickets, classify, categorize, and prioritize them, and route it to the right team. And, and this system has replaced over 150 workflow rules that used to exist, and with almost the same or better accuracy.
That's amazing.
So if you stay with the Bosch example, actually, are they using agents mainly from a back-end perspective? You just mentioned classifying service tickets, for example, right? And putting them in the right buckets so the right people can actually work on these tickets, for example, which used to be harder with a workflow system. Or are they using it actually towards the front end, to the end user, basically, where it's mainly about asking maybe product questions or general questions? Where do you see it we're going, basically?
Like I had the same question. Is it really just looking at the text that came in, the email that came in, and try and put it into a bucket? Or is it sending back an email asking, hey, Shardul, you sent that email. Did you mean this or that? We can help you better, before putting it into a bucket or queue. Is it the one or the other?
It's actually both. So,
Okay.
so what we have right now, demonstrable proof, is of the former, right? Which is essentially a classification agent which runs behind the scenes, which runs in the background to classify incoming ticket based on the information that's available right now. Okay. And then we also launched a Q&A agent, which could essentially look into the particular incoming ticket, look into all the interactions, look into all the conversations that have happened so far, and get into the crux of the issue and identify an answer, identify a resolution based on your existing knowledge bases, based on similar cases which have been resolved in the past, and so on. And the third is to automatically create a knowledge base article if a resolution was successful. Now, a customer can choose, and they are choosing to turn all three of them on at the same time. So now you're going from a single agent system to a multi-agent system when all three agents need to collaborate, because it doesn't make sense to create a knowledge-based article before it has been classified and before you have a resolution. So they need to work together to orchestrate the work in between them. And this can all happen today, right? Like, so this is already part of the CX AI toolkit, and it's available in production for all of our CX customers to use.
That's very cool. So now, I mean, you already talked about multi-agent systems, right? And in our CX world, there's sales and service, there's commerce, right? There's marketing with MRSys and so on. So I could imagine all these are kind of agents that are kind of combined into one top agent. And then as a user, as a backend user, I could say something like, hey, create a new storefront, plus also create a marketing campaign and whatever, respond in this style with service tickets or something like that. But what about the larger SAP ecosystem, right? So the one thing that comes to my mind is Joule, which is like SAP's agent system that everybody talks about. How will this be integrated into the larger SAP ecosystem?
Right. So there's Joule Studio, right? Like so Joule Studio is our design time solution, which allows customers, partners, as well as internally for us to build agents, right? And then there's Joule, which is the conversational co-pilot, right? Like, which is sort of like the orchestrator of agentic behaviors and skills across the SAP landscape, right? So all agents that we launch are actually Joule agents.
Okay.
Now, what you'll see is, like, with the introduction of a singular agent registry, a singular skills registry, a CX agent, like, you could actually go to Joule Studio and you could actually create a end-to-end super agent, which says, you know what, like, first of all, I want to see, I want a supply chain agent or a retail agent, or let's say as for fashion agent, with whenever a new product is introduced, whenever I see a new product article, create a description for it, enhance its images, publish it to Commerce Cloud, create a storefront, and then launch a marketing campaign in MRSys. So now you have like the CX agents, like we contribute the CX agents, the ERP team contributes the as for fashion agents, and the MRSys team is contributing that, and like now all of it is brought together by Joule. So that's the path that we are moving towards, and that's it's actually gonna be a pretty big focus for us at Sapphire this year.
Yeah,
so I'm already
sounds pretty amazing.
Probably should be spilling.
Like a lot of automation that's going to happen, and lots of agents working together to make a lot of magic happen very autonomously. Will there be some human decision somewhere in the loop? Will there be influence you can take as a human, or even take a final decision? Like, will there be, like you talked about the storefront, for example, will there be a step
can I cut
where
it short?
take a look?
The question is, how long will the human stay in the loop? That's the question.
That's not what I tried to ask.
Come on.
I think for a pretty long time, right? Like the example that I just gave, and all the scenarios that we have been talking about, right? Like there are some scenarios, the more constrained the problem is, and the more likely it is to be solved completely autonomously by an agent. the more open-ended the problem becomes, like it's more likely that you need a human in the loop who would come in sort of like an agent orchestrator who makes the final call on what needs to happen. Or you could talk about certain high stakes scenarios where before reaching out to a big account or before reaching out to a B2B buyer or a supplier who is a huge customer of yours, who's a primary customer, we probably don't want an agent reacting with them, right? Like unless it's something that they desire. So I think like there'll always be scope for human intervention. Like even the agents that we have launched so far, there is an option for the customer to say, I want it to act completely autonomously. In that case, it will actually do the back and forth interaction with the end customer.
Yeah.
But the default setting is that we actually, all the agent outcomes, we put forward to you as recommendations. You review them, and then you're like, hey, like whether I want this to proceed ahead or not, right? Like so, and because it will also take time for any customer to build confidence in the system before they expose it and they make it go right.
I mean, especially when if you stay in this service use case, for example, right, we have incoming service tickets, for example. If something was working in 99.9% of all the cases, then you as a customer probably have a lot of trust that it works, and you can just let it run autonomously, right? So I guess there's I see like two sliders. One is like the percentage of the times it worked basically, and the other thing is basically maybe the volume of the deal or so, right? If you're dealing with $1 billion or so, then you might not want to have an agent doing this alone, actually, something like that.
Exactly. And that's what I mean by constraint, because if the problem is constrained, the chances of the accuracy and precision being high is higher.
Nevertheless, there's probably many cases where you don't want to have full autonomy, but nevertheless, I think the autonomy it's going to increase, and it's definitely where we're going to move for. And you touched all of that a little bit, but where is it really that we're going towards? What's the future of all of this? If we can have a bit of a very high level perspective into the next couple of years.
Yeah, look, at this point, now I'm going into the realm of projecting, right? Like, and so
yeah, of course.
So, yeah, and the next 2 years is again too soon. Like we know pretty much like there will be an end of this year and maybe even early next year. But most likely we will see a lot of the knowledge work being automated by agents, right? Like so, for example, primarily reliance on doing research, reliance on finding information, looking into FAQ, doing knowledge bases, answering questions. I think there is a pretty good chance that like you'll see more and more agents come in there and increase the efficiency of operations. And then you'll also see a rise in human experts to basically make calls on like, okay, like what should be routed to an agent versus what needs to be taken by a human. And when an agent goes wrong, how do you actually tune the prompt, so to speak, or tune the instructions to make it right again? So that's the, and I think it will definitely happen within the next 5 years for sure.
You know, another thing that just comes to my mind is actually, right, I mean, all our smartphones and all the devices we carry will also be super smart, and they will be agentic, and they'll do, I know, appointments at the haircutters for us, not for me, but for you maybe. So, right? And if you combine that with all the other systems that are running somewhere, it's basically either these agents will basically use the old front ends, or these front ends will go away and the agents will just talk among each other, basically, right? So isn't that the likely future? Because I mean, there's at some point we come down to actually rewriting the protocols again into GraphQL also, because that's what agents talk best or something like that, right? And not going down the human visible, you click a button route, for example, on a website, actually. So I'm wondering when this will be the point where we simplify things for the agents, right? While right now it's optimized for humans, actually. So the whole why.
Yeah. I mean, like for sure. Like I'm like, for example, we will definitely see more and more content being created and more experiences created for agents, not just humans. And what I mean by that is like, how do I put my information out that's easier for an agent to digest so that it's more likely that it will use that information to serve up a particular query and give me the right attribution. Right? Like, so think of like search engine optimization, like how websites today designed to ensure that they always show up on Google and Bing. Like it's essentially the same with agents, right? Like, so that will definitely
I really think that at some point there must be some kind of, Web3 offered protocol that enables agents to just pick up the functionality that you provide basically on your website, on your shopping system or something like that, right? So you can be part of a bigger agent system, I guess. Yeah, which now seems to be a lot of custom built solutions, but there will be a standard most likely, right? So at some point.
And there should be for sure. When will the standard come across? It's always hard to predict. But what we can say for sure at this point is, right, like it's the interaction points or the number of interactions between agent to agents or system to systems will definitely increase. The scenario that you mentioned about like an agent calling on your behalf to a barbershop and making an appointment for you, and then most likely the call is received by another agent who's responsible for reservations, and they end up making them interact with each other and set up time for you. That's but it has pretty high likelihood of being achievable in a short period of time. Like if you remember, there was a Google Next event.
Sorry, I just wanted. I think I got it from one of these events.
Right, where I think Sundar Pichai at that time, he actually demoed that capability of I forget what the name, what Google called that assistant, where they would call on your behalf and make reservations in restaurants on your behalf. Right. Yeah. But now most of the times, So I
think that's functionality that somehow never came to Europe, but maybe it was in the US existing or exists right now. So
I think it was very limited. But if you have a Pixel phone, right, like you can ask Pixel to take the call on your behalf, and it will essentially ask the person to say what the purpose of the call is, and it will transcribe anything and show him, and I'll have an option to take over from the agent, right? Now the capability in Pixel right now, at least the last time I tested it, was not that great. I mean, it was still mind-blowing when you think about it 3-4 years ago, but not compared to where technology is right now. But you could imagine that getting so much better.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I also used the call screening functionality recently, and it at least gets people off your call list, basically. That's what happened. But I think we're going to
small things.
Into different topics now. I think this was exciting, really. There was a great talk. Andreas, do you have any other questions about?
No, we handled anything. I, meanwhile, had to listen to somebody. I wish I had an agent for that. Somebody rang the door. Probably one of my kids came home.
Maybe we should have a little teaser. Basically, we'll have more about Agentic AI coming soon. Yeah, so we talked to internal further experts basically about agents at SAP, and so we'll definitely have more information coming down in the next episodes. So stay tuned, subscribe to our lovely channel. Thank you so much.
And worry not, we also have more on sports. So it's agents and sports coming up. Lots of content.
If you're ever gonna have an episode on agents and cricket, count me in.
Yeah, we can do that actually. Right. No problem. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For your time.
Always a
Appreciate
pleasure.
it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.